welcome to this week's Thought for the Week. At YF on Sunday night, we started into a new series in a book that we are going to be following. Everyone in YF got a copy of this book and it's called Like or Follow. The first session that we were looking at is all about, is Jesus relevant today? But for starters, on Sunday evening, the first question that we had to discuss in groups was, have you ever had a wrong first impression? Now, some of the answers were very, very interesting. Things that we thought about people when we first met them, only for us to discover that it was wrong. We found out in the group that I was in that there was one of the young people whose first impression of me was that I was really scary, just because it looked like I had an angry face all the time, and it was only then they realised that's just my face, that's just what I look like. Other people thought that people were maybe a bit strange or a bit weird, but actually when you got to know them, it was not like that at all. Nothing could be further from the truth. And it got me thinking about this idea of impressions and first impressions. Do you think you make a good first impression? If somebody meets you for the first time, what do you think they are thinking about you? Do you think you give a good first impression? Maybe you give off really good vibes, that you're a happy person, someone you want to be around. Or maybe you're like me and you give off a terrible first impression where it seems like you're just angry all the time and maybe you're a little bit scary. We went on in our discussions to think about, well, what's your impression of Jesus? What do you think of when you think of him? And it's this idea of, well, what do we think of Jesus? What do you think people's first impressions of Jesus are? In the Bible, it talks about how we are sometimes the first impression that people get of Jesus. When people look at us and they see Jesus, what do they see? Do you think we give off an impression of people that you want to be around? Do we give off a good impression that we are warm and welcoming and friendly? Or do you think we give off an impression that we don't really want anybody nearby? We don't want people to be with us. We maybe give off that impression that we're a wee bit scary, we're a wee bit angry, and we're maybe not that friendly at all. We also read about people in the Bible who had different impressions of Jesus, what they thought he was like, who they thought he was. And whenever they get to know him, they realise that he's more incredible than they can imagine. I'm going to read from a passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. I'm going to read it from the Message version because I think it helps us to see a little bit more of what this passage is saying. It says, "Our firm decision is to work from this focus centre. One man died for everyone. That puts everyone in the same boat. He included everyone in his death so that everyone could also be included in his life. A resurrection life. A far better life than people ever lived on their own. Because of this decision, we don't evaluate people by what they have or how they look. We looked at the Messiah that way once and got it all wrong, as you know. We certainly don't look at him that way anymore. Now we look inside, and what we see is that anyone united with the Messiah gets a fresh start, is created new. The old life is gone, a new life burgeons. Look at it. All this comes from the God who settled the relationship between us and him, and then called us to settle our relationships with each other. God put the world square with himself through the Messiah, giving the world a fresh start by offering forgiveness of sins. God has given us the task of telling everyone what he's doing. We are Christ's representatives. God uses us to persuade men and women to drop their differences and enter into God's work of making things right between them. We're speaking for Christ himself now. Become friends with God. He's already a friend with you." Imagine you could go back and have a second first impression. Would you do something differently? Why don't we go into this week thinking that whenever we meet people for the first time, they're actually getting an impression of what Jesus is like by how they interact with us? What impression do you want to give of Jesus as you interact with others this week?